Well, I guess for the week leading up to the Queen of the Classics, Paris-Roubaix, the riders are always looking to the skies to see just what the weather will do. Good news from today, it's potentially going to be dry all day. Hi everybody, welcome to what is the 107th edition of the Queen of the Classics, Paris-Roubaix. I'm Phil Liggett, joined of course by Paul Sherwin. And let me say right away, he once finished third in the amateur Paris-Roubaix, right?
Yeah, a little bit shorter, but over exactly the same cobblestones. I think my claim to fame, though, is finishing 15th in the pro event, having fallen off on 9 occasions.
Well, the pavé, of course, is what we all talk about. And we've got about 33 miles of cobblestones this year. One or two slight changes?
One or two slight changes because a couple of the cobblestone sections have been regarded this year as being too dangerous for the riders to take. They've been taken out for this year. But, they are preserving the cobblestones in this part of the world, and I think we'll see them come back sometime in the future.
Now, the riders have been going, having left Compiègne this morning at 11:15 local time for the last 45 minutes. We, of course, at the finishing line here, the Roubaix Velodrome, which is one of the oldest tracks in the world of cycling, and it's also now the finishing venue for the classic race and has always been for Paris-Roubaix. And you know, Paul, it's the only classic that still finishes on a track.
I know a lot of the riders feel it's a very special arrival here in Paris-Roubaix because it's like the end of a marathon, or for the gladiators coming into the amphitheatre at the end of a great battle. Marc Madiot said that he is so happy that when he won his 2 Paris-Roubaix, they finished right here. He said, I won't translate exactly what he said, but he would not be too satisfied winning in a little backstreet of Roubaix.
All right, well, the first cobbles are encountered after 60 miles today at Troisville. Let's come clean. Who are the favourites? Who's going to win?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, number one favourite has got to be Big Tom Boonen. A little bit frustrated last week in the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Favourite for us, I think, you won't disagree with me, George Hincapie. Lots of experience, a man who wants to win this race. He has the desire to win this race. He just needs to hope that Lady Luck is going to be on his side rather than against him.
Well, Lady Luck, that's the big question. Well, yesterday, Paul Sherwin was in the start area of Compiègne where the riders assembled and were introduced to a huge crowd. So let's go back to one day before the start and talk to some of the riders.
Fabian, a little bit of bad luck this year, but certainly last week in the Tour of Flanders, that was also bad luck.
I think almost I have since after my win in Tour of California, I've always bad luck. I mean, crash, sickness, some problems with the bike. I mean, now in Flanders, chain broken. Now in Gent-Wevelgem, puncture. Lost this break, was when the front was also in the end going to the finish. What maybe I needed for have is a little bit more that has on this Paris-Roubaix, but I know what I have to do. I feel good. I will give everything what I have, and I think with all those memories, what I had it in Paris-Roubaix, or even on the start line in Compiègne when I won in the Tour de France, I will keep this all in mind and give everything and fight for it and fight until to the end.
The thing about Paris-Roubaix is if you don't have any bad luck at all, even if you're not 100%, if you've got the experience and the motivation, that can sometimes make the difference.
Yeah, the race is so long, the race is special, and it's not the strongest normally. Sometimes he wins this race. I mean, I remember really good on the back when I was riding the first time this race. I was with Tuffy in a break, but really behind, and on the end he finished 5th. He did for sure a pretty strong race, but his experience and his smartness, he's bring him so long or so good in the front, and then I know what I have to do the same. I mean, I have to use really good my head. I have to put everything on the table and use my experience, use the motivation, what I have, and then we see.
Well, that's what I heard that you'd been saying just recently. Sometimes in Paris-Roubaix, you're not actually racing against the opposition, you're racing against yourself.
Yeah, you race against yourself, but you race against the cobbles, because this is the biggest fight what you have to do. I mean, you can stay behind the rider, but the pain you get, not because you stay behind the rider or it's because it's hard, it's because the cobblestones, they're going to hurt you, they're going to make pain, and you have to get over that and fighting until to the end. Thanks.
Well, George, first of all, we saw your crash last week in the Tour of Flanders. How is everything? Have you got over those injuries?
Yeah, I'm over them. It was a tough break, 200 meters from the line, but I feel good now. Fortunately, I didn't get hurt. I landed on top of a pile of riders, but I'm ready to go.
You've always said that to win Paris-Roubaix, you need a very strong team around you. How do you rate Team High Road Columbia this year for the attempt to get the title?
Team's super strong. I mean, you saw Eddie win on Wednesday, and we got Bergard and Eisel. He's feeling a lot better from his crashes. And Michael Berry's back. He helped me last time when I got second place here, so I'm excited that he's back on the team. We really got a complete roster, and I think we're definitely ready for tomorrow.
I was talking to your team manager, Alan Piper, and he told me over the last couple of weeks you've trained and prepared in a different way for this season's classics.
Yeah, well, I started a lot earlier this season just with the Tour Down Under, which has helped me be a little bit fitter for this time of the year, I believe. And skipped a couple of races, did a couple of longer, easier rides at home, and I think it's going to pay off for tomorrow. I feel fresher than I normally do and fitter.
And I hear that you've been getting advice from other people around the world of professional cycling too about what kind of technical assistance you need.
Yeah, I've had some calls. I mean, I spoke to him. Museu actually called me. Just told me a couple of things about what has helped him in the past and what kind of equipment he's used, and just gave me some good advice. I got a lot of respect for him, so it was nice to hear from him.
Some people say that a race like Paris-Roubaix, you might as well forget about high-tech specifications, just go back to old, simple stuff that ain't going to break.
Old school. Well, I've used a little bit of everything in this race, actually pretty much everything. And yeah, I've had some bad luck with some equipment, but I think it's really what you feel most comfortable in. I mean, I think the sport evolves so much that you got to go with higher tech stuff at times. But I think tomorrow I'm keeping it pretty stock, and we'll see how that works out for me.
Antonio, a little bit of bad luck for you in Gent-Wevelgem, but maybe it's best to have bad luck before Paris-Roubaix.
Well, I think the bad luck was on Flanders. Gent-Wevelgem, I just was not in the first echelon. I took it a little bit easy in the start, and I think also that for tomorrow, all the bad luck is gone. So I hope that everything is okay, but at least if I have bad luck, I know how to stand up again and go for the race again.
I read some statistics that riders who've won Paris-Roubaix in the last few years have been 30, 31, 32. You're just about the right age to win Paris-Roubaix this time.
Yeah, I'm 31 now, 32 at the end of September. I'm feeling, it's true, I'm feeling more comfortable on this kind of races as long as the years goes by, and it's true that less chances I have now because my career cannot long till many years more, but I will try to take the profit of this experience and don't miss a good chance.
Experience is important, but also you can take advantage maybe of the fighting between Bonen and Pozzato like last week.
I don't think they will do it again. I think they learned already. Pozzato already said that he will only look for Bonen, but I don't like to fight. I mean, for me, the important is the good result at the end and not to show that I'm the stronger.
The most important thing is to ride Paris-Roubaix for yourself.
Of course. Sorry, I didn't...
Le plus important, the best thing for you is to ride for your own race and not to look to anybody else.
Exactly. Everybody's asking what's the way to fight Quick Step, what's the way to... Yeah, for me, the race is already hard itself to think about other strong teams or other strong riders like people, so I will try to enjoy the race, to do my best and only focus on Roubaix. Thanks.
Well, Brian, pretty successful a couple of days ago in Gent-Wevelgem. How can you turn that success into a victory in Paris-Roubaix?
Actually, I believe with the confidence the riders, the team got right now, they should, for sure it doesn't make it more complicated. I believe the self-confidence for the riders is good, and of course I know like George, we got Eisel, we got Burkhardt and Ewald now. We got like 4 riders who actually can win the race, so it should make everything slightly more easy for us.
I spoke to Alan Piper just a couple of days ago. They changed the preparation for George Hincapie, and he seems to be a lot fresher in this Classics week.
Of course. Actually, I would say he was quite fresh. He was quite all right last year. Unfortunately, he crashed on a very bad moment. And we, I believe, was the driving car number 22. So, I mean, honestly, there's always a race going on in the race. It's not only the legs always. You need a little bit of luck from Lady Fortuna, I believe. It's called also in English. And it's not only the legs. I believe George is pretty good as he can be. And then we cross our fingers he's not going to crash or puncture us or anything like that. For sure we're going to protect him, and then we have to wait and see.
Tom, are you feeling a little bit of pressure because you weren't able to win the Tour of Flanders last week, and this Paris-Roubaix is looking to try and make your third victory?
Yeah, it's pressure's always there, always in this period of the year. So it's not more or less than the other races. The only difference is with last year. It's not a real difference. Is that I did a few good results in the races that were the past races. So I'm really confident that I will be there tomorrow and maybe be a key factor to decide who wins the race, and hopefully it will be me.
Is it a little bit frustrating to see the attitude of some riders, like maybe Pozzato last week, who based their race just on you?
Frustrating is not the right word. It's sport, and some people you have tactics in the race, and sometimes the tactics works and sometimes they don't work, and it's normal that they try to focus at someone who has already done really good in certain races.
But Paris-Roubaix is a different race to the Tour of Flanders. It's a fight more often to get into the cobblestones, and it's a race I think that you really enjoy.
Yeah, but I'm having fun the last few weeks, and I think that's the key factor in the race. It's the most important, and winning or losing is sometimes it's really close to each other. It's not always a matter of shape or form. Sometimes something else decides a good result. So I did everything I was supposed to do, and I'm really good right now. So hopefully I can get a good result to finish a really good period of the season.
And as always, very important, Team Quickstep is a strong team with a lot of men, and I'm surprised by Sylvain Chavanel.
Yeah, he's doing really good. We were really surprised that he was doing so good in this kind of classics, and that's why we decided all together that it would be stupid not to take him to Paris-Roubaix, not to let him start, because he wanted to, and his shape is so good right now, so that you better use it, because in the next few weeks it's already a long time that he's on a good level.
Good luck.
Thanks, man.
It's a bit warm, isn't it, for Paris-Roubaix?
Yeah.
Henrik, finally it seems the question has been answered. You've decided to be Australian and no longer be a German.
Oh yeah, well that's something I've been planning to do like the last 2 years, but just like I don't know why, but like this just seemed to hit the media like the last 2 weeks, and it's just something I've always had in the back of my mind, and that's what I want to do next year. So that's my decision.
What's the change in you from last year to this year? Because before we regarded you kind of as a sprinter, and now you're a one-day classics rider.
Yeah, well, I always consider myself like I love these races here in Belgium, and just maybe a new team, it was new luck. I just with the Geldersteiner, we couldn't really concentrate on the classics like the cobblestone classics, and now here with Cervelo, everything's just changed. Like the team, I've got 100% support behind me. I believe in myself now. Trained different throughout the whole winter, like just totally serious, like just 100% to try and make everything work for this year, and it's been up until now, it's been absolutely perfect.
It's very difficult to put a brand new team together like Cervelo have done and actually gel so quickly. You've gelled almost immediately this season, and you get on extremely well with Thor Hushovd.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people and a lot of the other teams are very surprised at the way we're riding, because we just mix it. We're just like a bunch of guys that we get on along with each other really good, and it just seems to work, and it's really good that it's happened so quick.
Okay, what's the plan going to be for Sunday?
Well, I'm not sure yet because we haven't had a team meeting, but I don't see myself like up there like in Flanders, or you never know. My legs still feel okay, but like I said before Flanders, I slowly feel that the season's taking its toll on me. Like my legs aren't as fresh as they were 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think Thor Hushovd and Roger Hemmen, they're going to be our two main men.
So what about the fact that Paris-Roubaix is going to be Australian TV live for 3 hours at 10 o'clock at night?
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, it's great to see in Australia, like cycling in Australia is getting bigger and bigger. Just my dad the other day, oh yeah, the whole town's getting together, going to watch it. I said, oh, don't tell me this, I don't need this, I can't deal with the pressure. But no, it's really good. So it's good fun. Good.
We'll be following you.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers, mate.
No worries.
Jeremy, new team, new motivation. Must be good riding on a successful team.
It's great to be in this team. I mean, all the guys have gelled together. We're getting good results from the beginning, and it's pretty amazing the new team can perform so well.
That's what surprises me, because very often it takes a year or 2 years for a team to gel together. This team seemed to gel together almost immediately.
Yeah, we just got lucky. I mean, there's 9 or 10 guys who are on the Classics team, who went to Qatar. There's a few guys who went to California, but yeah, we just started in Qatar and we haven't looked back.
And it's been a long time that you've seemed to be looking for a team where you could find yourself comfortable. I think you're comfortable now.
Yeah, last I found a team where I've got a job, where you're working for other guys. You get your chance when you get your chance, and in cycling that's what you need. I mean, you can try and win races all the time, but when you don't have a team with you, it's really hard. Thanks.
Completely new team this year, and it seems that the team has become one of the dangerous teams for the Classics.
Yeah, that's for sure. We are a strong, really strong Classic team, so everything works well at the moment. So just hope we just can keep going like this.
I think you've got a very strong, solid team, because you can count on a number of people. You can count on Heinrich Hausler, you can count on Roger Hammond. It's possibly a team that will support you a lot better than some of your previous teams.
Yeah, I think so. This thing is its team is really strong, and especially for tomorrow's Paris-Roubaix, it's really good. So I think we can be a few of us in the final.
I think just talking to Heinrich Hausler just a little bit earlier, he said tomorrow it's the day for Thor Hushovd. He's our big man. He's the one we want to look after.
Yeah, we see. I think I know that I have a good form, so I just need the day tomorrow where everything works well, and then I think I'll be in the final.
Do you think the weather's going to make any difference? Saying there might be a little bit of rain towards the end of the afternoon.
Yeah, of course, if it's rain, the cobbles is different, but I don't mind if it starts to rain. That's fine.
How are you going to feel going into this year's Paris-Roubaix?
Yeah, of course the team expect me to be in the final and to do a good race, but you never know in this race. I mean, it's you gotta have good luck here as well. Huh?
You have to have a strong team behind you to get you to the important places. What's the team's strategy going to be?
Yeah, we're gonna have Brad Wiggins for the final, so I think he's going really good. He did a good time trial at 3 days of the Palma, and yeah, I think he'll be up there in the final of the race.
It seems as if Brad has motivated himself for these cobblestone classics. Is it to help you, or is it to ride for himself?
Yeah, no, he's here to help me, and he did this race 5 times, he said, and yeah, he really likes it, so that's good for me.
Do you get surprised sometimes, because you're still a very young bike rider, to see yourself rivaling men like Tom Boonen, for example?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, if I'm in the break and I look around, it surprised me that I'm still there. But yeah, I'm 25 years already, so not that young anymore.
Well, Tom Boonen seems to think that you're a man that he's going to keep a very close watch on tomorrow, because he feels that you're the man could help in make the decision of the race.
Yeah, maybe I could, but we will see that tomorrow. Huh?
Okay, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, hello and welcome to what is the 107th running of the race between Paris and Roubaix, 259 kilometres. I'm Phil Liggett. Alongside me is Paul Sherwin. And these are the winners of recent years here. Belgium holding the highest number of wins by a nation, 52 in fact. France coming second at 28. Unusual that the host nation isn't the champion winner, but that's the way it is. These roads are so specific and so like the roads of nearby Belgium in Flanders. And this is the breakaway which got away pretty early on today. By the 60-kilometre point, they built themselves a lead. And I'm pleased to say there are 2 Australians and 1 Kiwi in this breakaway, Wesley Sulzberger. Riding now for the Française des Jeux team, Matthew Goss, who has ridden so well midweek in Ghent-Wevelgem, rides for Saxo Bank. Sadly, we're without Stuart O'Grady, who is recovering from injury. And also up here is Greg Henderson of Team Columbia High Road. But in all, 11 riders, and not really slipping away, Paul. But as we head on to section 24 now, they're just on 4 minutes ahead.
Well, this has been the recipe for the Paris-Roubaix over the last few years. All the teams seem to give out the order to the men on their squads to get in that early morning breakaway. And the reason they want to do that is because they're usually pretty certain the early morning breakaway will get caught later on in the race, but it gives them the advantage of having more teammates once they catch them up. And so I feel this will stabilise for a fraction. And then once we get to the more strategic sections of cobblestones, like the Forest of Arenberg, it'll start to come back together.
Well, the only Italian in the breakaway, we've just seen him in the pink colours there of Lamprey, is Angelo Furlan. Matthew Goss seems to have found his form here, the Tassie rider. We've got Martin Wijnands from Belgium and Casper Klostergaard from the Saxo Bank, teammate of Goss. He's a Danish rider, of course. Steven Kotzer rides for the Garmin Slipstream team. He's an American. It's quite a nice international breakaway, this. Jos Postuma rode a very good 3 days at the Panna 2 weeks ago. He won that race last year. He's here for Holland. Servaes Knaven, can you believe, Paul, riding his 15th Queen of the Classics, and he's never failed to finish.
That is a very impressive resume for Servaes Knaven. As you said, he's won this race in the past, and he's then just going to be 1 bicycle length behind the famous Belgian rider Raymond Impanis, who rode and finished 16 times Paris-Roubaix.
That means he can't retire yet, although he's 40 years of age now, Servaes Knaven. It's time he started enjoying the sport from this side of the television set, I would think. But a great character, well known in Australia too, because he raced there in the old days of the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic up in New South Wales. Well, there's a missed bottle by the Quick-Step boys. They're really monitoring this breakaway. We're racing up through Solem here now, 142 kilometres still to go. But as you can see here, Quick-Step are not thinking short term, they're thinking long term. And they're hoping that they can keep the likes of Tom Bonan safe for when the cobbles turn a little bit ugly.
They are the toughest squad here, the most solid squad, I would have to say, Team Quick-Step. That's them in the blue and white jerseys. Tom Bonan won't be too far away. The man on the front line, in fact, just briefly, who we saw there was the winner, of course, of the Tour of Flanders last week in a very emphatic style. On the horizon, at 141 kilometres to go to the finish, the next section of cobblestones the riders will be facing up to, Phil, is the 23rd section to go. And it's a 2.3 kilometre length of cobblestones from Vertin to Saint-Martin-sur-Écaillon. And that's what this race is really very much all about. It's all about this section of cobblestones. There are 32 miles or 52 kilometres of cobblestones in this edition this year. And they're some of the worst roads that the north of France has got to offer.
A nice aerial view of the helicopter there. This will be Kotzer, who's in the breakaway at the moment. Steve Kotzer rides for the Garmin Slipstream team, slightly changed his name this year, and sorting themselves out. One rider has dropped away from the breakaway now, Jan Alfredo from Française des Jeux. So we're down to just 10 riders in the lead. We haven't seen any of them. We've only just taken our pictures here in France. We haven't seen anybody on the cobblestones at the moment. But certainly when the 11 riders got to the first crossing of the first section, which was at Troisville at 98 kilometres, they held a lead of just over a minute. And since then they've pushed out over 4 sections of pavé to just on 4 minutes and just lost the one rider, Johan Alfredo of Française des Jeux. The main field, though, one gets the feeling, are poised to pounce as they race across France here. This is northern France. Very often you'll be forgiven for thinking you are in Belgium, and the French people here in France are not far away from the frontier. and the road's a little bit more akin to the type of road we find in Belgium, especially with these cobblestones.
Well, I think, Phil, if you look back over a little piece of a little part of history, you will find that on a number of occasions this part of France we're in has actually swapped between being French and also being Belgian. In fact, it's known as the Flandre Artois, and as you get further up towards the coast, towns like Dunkerque are in fact old Flemish names.
That's right. As they come up towards the borders in Roubaix, a lot of the towns sound more Flemish than they do French, like Siswang. And I think the French themselves have a little bit of trouble getting the tongue around some of the town names here. Good early morning breakaway, this one. Remember the overall distance, 259 kilometres. I'll give you the full list of names in the breakaway. Martin Weiner to Quick Step, Matthew Goss, the Australian on Saxo Bank, Angelo Furlan from Lamprey, Stephen Kotzer from Garwin Slipstream, Greg Henderson from Team Columbia High Road, the Kiwi, Wesley Sulzberger from Française des Jeux, and really showing some good young form. Has a great future, I think. Joost Postuma from Rabobank, Servaes Canavan, another Dutchman on Milram, Steve Chanel, Belgian rider on the Bouygues French rider on the Bouygues Telecom, Andreas Clear of Cervelo, who rode extremely well midweek in the Ghent-Wevelgem race, and I think he's the man now who has been flagged up front to try and draw the sting of the likes of Tom Bonen, George Hincapie, and some of the bigger riders still in that peloton.
Quick chance there just to get to see Wesley Sulzberger at the back there, wearing number 67 in the blue shorts. He's a rider who I think has got the great chance of coming onto this Française des Jeux team. It's a team that over the years, Phil, has I think really helped to develop and place a lot of top Australian riders into different professional teams. It seems to be a gateway for the riders there. Number 101 is Servaes Canavan. He's the man who's won this race previously, but participating in Paris-Roubaix today for the 15th time. And that really is quite a feat.
I should imagine that Stewie O'Grady, the winner of the race a couple of years ago, who was trying to make this one of his targets for the year, and then had, dare I say, yet another fall, which resulted in broken bones, and he's now having to watch. But his heart will be here today, especially for his Saxo Bank team, who I think might have to lean rather heavily on the likes of Fabian Cancellara or perhaps Matti Breschel if they're going to bring the goods home today.
Well, this is the section number 23 to go, 2.3 kilometers in length and a 3-star rating. Now, the cobblestone sections in Paris-Roubaix are rated by stars from 1 to 5 stars. Now, a 5-star rating is the most difficult section of cobblestones that the riders will face, and it's made more difficult by the length of it, but also by the condition of the cobbles, and some of the worst ones come a little bit later on. Groups of cobblestones like, of course, the famous Forest of Arenberg.
Well, Paul Schoen alongside me is going to bounce along the cobbles now with the riders. He finished third in the amateur version, slightly shorter, same length of cobblestones though in Paris-Roubaix. He's ridden the professional one as well, and they are tough. The riders themselves will finish today with their hands bleeding because of the way they have to grip onto those handlebars. Oh dear.
Well, talking about bleeding, here's a rider who had an accident a little bit earlier on. This is Martin Elminger, and he was one of the pre-race favourites for AG2R, and he's obviously gone down very hard out on the course. The strange thing about Paris-Roubaix is these 27 sections of cobblestones. It's very important to get into them in the first 10 or 15 places in the main field, and it's almost a battle every 10 or 15 kilometers to get into the cobblestone sections in the first part of the main field. That's why there are so many accidents.
Elminger, well known down under for the Tour Down Under. He won it back in 2007. He finished fourth in it this year when Lance Armstrong announced his return to cycling in person in Australia, in Adelaide, in the month of January. Elminger, very different style of rider over these cobblestones though.
Just sitting on the back there, I saw Sulzberger in this group. In fact, the race radio a few moments ago, it said that his teammate, Johan Ofredo, wasn't in that leading group. But in fact, I've just noticed that both riders from Française des Jeux are still present. Yep. So it still is an 11-man leading group as they battle over this section of cobblestones. And for the moment, the skies look as if it's going to be a dry Paris-Roubaix, but I know one or two of our fellow commentators are rubbing their hands here, hoping that in the latter part of the afternoon, the rain comes down.
Well, we're sat not very far away from the Irish former cyclist, Sean Kelly, who won this race on 2 occasions. He's licking his lips today when he sees somebody else suffer, but it was a race that Sean always rode very, very well in. We've had a few years now without bad weather. The riders fear the bad weather. It turns these cobblestones into ice rinks. But today, and all week, in fact, it has been beautiful in this region. Spring is very definitely burst. All the trees have coloured up nicely, and the riders full of a lot of optimism today. 187 of them setting out. Now, you did mention about Alfredo, Paul. He was dropped, but he got back. He got unhitched on one of the sectors of cobblestones, but you're right, he's back in that leading group of 11 now.
BMC, the American Swiss team, just over on the left-hand side there. That's Jeff Lauder in the black and whites. They were brought into this race as a wild card, and very happy they are too, I think, to be participating.
Silence Lotto, the team of Cadel Evans, who has finished up in the podium places in a stage race in Spain yesterday. This isn't Cadel's type of race. He's thinking long-term to the Tour de France, and he'll be watching this on television and be very pleased he's not here amongst it, I'm sure of that. He's come up against Alberto Contador, a man he'll definitely have to challenge for the Tour de France in July.
See how many riders that are spread across the road there. They're all now trying to battle themselves up to the front end of the main field to get into this section of cobblestones in the first 10 or 15 places. This is the leading group, which is 11 riders strong. We are looking at an awful long way to go to the finish. 137 kilometers of racing still to go. And, of course, still for the men behind, 23 sections of cobblestones.
Well, this is where the riders try to just settle in as long as they can here, because 137 kilometers is a long way to go. There's some 53 kilometers of this bad pavé, and the worst of it, which is recognized in star ratings, the 5 stars are the worst, and they are still to come. So believe me, it's not just a matter of being a strong cyclist to win this race. You've got to be a little bit lucky, and this is why, because somebody will have made a mistake here.
Well, this is why all the big stars of the race, Phil, want to start in the first 15 to 20 places, because you always get these traffic jams at the back, and it really is not very good psychology. There's an Astana problem over on the right-hand side. A Lampre guy has gone down on the left-hand side. Just having a quick look at that Lampre rider. I think that was Massimiliano Mori.
It was.
And this is the chaos that Paris-Roubaix is all about. He shouldn't be hurt too much. He had a fairly soft landing.
Well, the Astana rider was the leader there. Jaroslav Popovic was the man who was off to the right, having his bike fixed up with a teammate. Didn't catch the teammate. But these boys now anxious. It sounds easy, Paul, but what you've got to do in Paris-Roubaix is stay at the front.
It's a fight all of the time. For every one of these competitions, you've got to get to the front end of the main field. And that's why just now we can see that Team Lotto are riding them at the front. There's Team Cervelo test team, Phil, have come to the front as well to keep the pace nice and high.
So we're looking here now at the peloton as they go border to border on the cobblestones. The strong men holding position at the front. The teammates, don't forget, professional cycling is a team race. The teammates are looking for their team leader, trying to hold him into a position where they'll keep him out of trouble as best they can. But if he has a problem, they are there, as we've just seen with Popovic, to perhaps give them a wheel, give them a bike. Because although they all have team cars following, it is very difficult for the cars to get through on these narrow roads.
Paris-Roubaix is a very complicated race to look after your riders, because the race splits up so much on the cobblestones that if a rider has a mechanical incident at the front end of the pack, he may well have to wait for up to 4 or 5 minutes for his team car to come alongside him. So the order of the day is if one of the team leaders has a mechanical incident, what happens is one of his teammates will try and swap wheels with him, or even bikes, to keep him up at the front end of the main field till that mechanical incident can be rectified a little bit later on.
This is Alain Blin setting the pace on the front for Cofidis. They're just getting slightly off the head of the pack. Now when you get down, this is the return of Popovic, I think, and the teammate who seems to have helped him is Morabito. There's Popovic just in front of him, so they've got to get back now. They've got a race on their hands, but they know their bad luck just now could be somebody else's bad luck up the road in a few minutes' time. You get on with the job and you chase.
You cannot give up in a race like Paris-Roubaix. I remember a situation where a guy by the name of Fons de Wolf lost an awful lot of time in the early part of the race, and he was sitting about 160th on the road. He didn't give up. He fought his way back into the race. He fought his way back along every section of cobblestones, and he came in on that occasion and finished in 4th place.
Just looking at the crowd here, this is a rent-a-crowd race, don't forget, because once they see the race go through here, they'll be heading for their cars and they'll be off to the next sector of pavé. Last night they will have spent poring over the race route with the maps to plan their routes through to watching this race, because it doesn't go direct from Compiègne, which is about 80 kilometres north of Paris, up to Roubaix. It zigzags, and that's why the spectators can watch it at least 4 times.
This is the front end of the peloton, and it's Romain Felu on the front. I'm surprised to see him riding so well, because he's a rider more reputedly a sprinter in the sport of professional cycling. But I think, like a lot of riders, they've become super motivated for Paris-Roubaix. That's at the end of section number 23. And everybody, I think, will take a back seat now, knowing that they've got themselves through that section nice and safely. Capelle-sur-Caillon is the next section, which is 22 for the peloton, 134 kilometres. Jeff Loud is also in that little chase group there. He either had a problem and dropped back and was picked up by them, or he had a reason to go back to the team car. But they should get back. Here they are. As they try to recover, they'll be heading on off. They're coming off sector 23 at the moment, so they're not that far behind. Now, they've got around about 4 kilometres of smooth road, Phil, to try and integrate at the front end of the peloton, which is just around the corner there. And then for Jaroslav Popovic, what he has to do in that 4-kilometre flat section is to try and get himself back up to the front end of the main field. Otherwise, he could get caught out again.
Well, although we don't have the mud here today and the puddles of water lying around, you do have the dust, and it is most unpleasant, believe me, riding behind the riders as the dust flies up into your face, because your eyes become quite sore after a long time of this. So you try and pick your own little trail if you can.
Well, Arrière de la Course, this is the back end of the race, and we're still following the group with Jaroslav Popovic, who is taking all kinds of risks. And you see how narrow those roads were. Back to the front end of the main field, it's Silence Lotto who are trying to set something up. Their man for today has got to be Leif Hoster. He's been so close to winning this race in the past. He's been so close to winning, of course, the Tour of Flanders, where he's finished second on 3 occasions. But he, I think, today will be trying to change all of those podium positions into a victory.
I think his best place, Paul, was last year, actually. It was 6th for Leif last year. He's had a couple of high finishes, but that was his best.
I think his best place was second, actually, but he was disqualified because of the train.
Right. Oh, there was 3 of them kicked out. Well, that was bad luck. That was a couple of years ago, and riders went through a closing level crossing here, and against the red flashing light, and that's an immediate disqualification. And all we saw on the stand that day was the winner, Tom Bone, and I think everybody else was gone home. They were all disgusted.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise. I felt very sorry for Leif Hoster on that occasion, because he rode an exceptional race on that day. 133 kilometres now to go as we look at this leading group. Servais Kanavan in the pale blue jersey of Team Milram at the back there. Phil has used all of his tactical knowledge to get into the early morning breakaway. This is the start of section number 22, the Pavé de Buste.
Well, these boys have been ahead now for the thick end of 80 kilometres. I'll give you their names quickly again. Martin Winans, Matthew Goss from Australia, Angelo Furlan, Italy, Stephen Kozza from the United States, Greg Henderson from New Zealand, Johanna Fredo from Fossetier, he's French, Wesley Sulzberger, another rider from the deep south of Australia, from Tasmania, Postuma of Rabobank, Servais Kanavan, the grand old man of Milram, Steve Scheinel of Bouygues Telecom, and Andres Kleyer. What's going on here?
This is another change of wheels here for Martin Elbinger, number 121 at the back of the race. She's got a teammate there up alongside him, trying to take out the wheel to pass it along to his team leader. And for Martin Elbinger, I think today is going to be a Paris-Roubaix a little bit too far.
Well, Lloyd Mondori has gone on, but it looks like Elmiger is saying enough is enough here. He's had a rough old ride and still 132 kilometres to go. So Lloyd Mondori continues to chase, but I think we said goodbye to Martin there.
Former winner of the Jacobs Creek Tour Down Under in Australia, a man who made his name there with this team at AG2R, which has always been extremely successful in the Antipodes.
Smooth roads for the peloton just for the moment. If the Australians can start performing like they did on Wednesday, they had so many riders in the front group. We were chatting with Brett Lancaster yesterday. He also is very confident with his new team of Cervelo. They've got potential winners on that squad today. Heinrich Hausler seems to be over his slight knee problem, but he is well aware that although he's German, he's very much Australian. He's got no trace of a German accent when you chat with him, and yesterday he was well aware that everybody in Australia was watching him. And I think that the whole of Inverell would completely shut down, even if it is dark and in the middle of the night, if he were to win today.
Just sitting on the back of the leading group of riders here, wearing number 8, is a teammate of Tom Bone, and this is Martin Wynants. Wynants, like all of the other riders in this breakaway, Phil, will have been given the order to make sure that we are present in the early breakaway, because once this break starts to get caught towards the end, Wynants is going to be a man who will be of assistance to Tom Bonen later on, just scrambling back onto the tail of the cobblestone there, Wellesley Sulzberger. He really is getting an eye-opener here this afternoon, Phil, because he's riding what I think is one of the most difficult bicycle races in the world, Paris-Roubaix, and that's why it has the nickname of the Queen of the Classics.
Martin Wynants for Quick Step, big responsibility representing this team up here, because this is the big winning team, at least the manager is, Patrick Lefebvre. He's been on this race with 9 winners over the years, which is incredible.
9 wins by that team or team structure in the last 15 years. But if you take the team classification for Paris-Roubaix, they have not been beaten since 1993.
So no pressure then?
Oh, not at all. No, they're going to sit back and have an easy day, I would say, this afternoon. Now, the pressure is there for this team. They love this race. Bear in mind that they created a little bit of history a few years ago when they finished 1st, 2nd and 3rd in Paris-Roubaix, and everybody says that is a feat that will never be repeated. They went on to do it 3 more times.
Exactly right. Well, that's the end of Sector 22 there. Remember, we're counting down to Sector 1, which is just a third of a kilometre of very smooth cobbles before they swing into the stadium here in Roubaix. Crowd are already coming in now, and it's a beautiful Easter Sunday here. And they've got a big television screen so they can watch all of the pictures that we have the pleasure of watching. There's the gap. It's come down slightly, 3:40. So the peloton will be quite happy with the way this is going just now. A little bit of infighting at the front and not allowing the breakaway to get too far ahead.
No, that's the important thing, just to make sure that that breakaway doesn't get too much of an advantage. All of these riders know that the real important section of cobblestones is the pavé of the Trouet d'Arenberg, or the Forest of Arenberg, and that's going to be in around about 30 kilometres time, and that's when everybody will battle, not to be in the first 15, Phil, but to be in the first 5, because the pavé of Arenberg is absolute chaos.
It is. They've buried it off these days. They're taking all off on the way, aren't they?
Because now
you see the riders just get stopped on the road. They're all helping each other because the cars cannot get near them at the moment. It looks like it was Team BMC. They've left 3 riders behind.
Well, I wonder which rider it was from BMC, because a couple of riders stopped to wait for their teammate. You may well just see those little dolls in the background. Those are something which are very typical to the north of France, and especially this area of France where we're going through. Those are the giants of Flanders, and they go around to every town fete.
Well, they get the best view of Paris-Roubaix, that's for sure. As the riders now pass underneath, I would suspect Alexander Moos, the leader of Team BAC, had a problem there with 2 team riders stopping to try and help him out.
Well, this is looks like Bradley Wiggins on the front here. It's definitely one of the riders from Garmin who've decided that they want to do a special performance here this afternoon. And this is the section 22 for the main field.
Yeah.
And it's a cobblestone known as Le Bois, and it's a 3-star rating.
3:38 is the gap at the moment. Somebody's been left by the leaders, but I'll have to work out who it is. They're down to 10 riders and 130 kilometres left to go. This is life on the back end at the cobblestones here. Just coming through there is Gatis Šmikulis from Latvia. He was in a chase earlier on. It now looks as though he's paying for the effort. He sat at the back.
Well, looking through the trees there, the early springtime yesterday has been replaced by some fairly low cloud here this afternoon. There's not much wind in the air, although a lot of people were very concerned about the wind direction, because that makes it very difficult on certain sections of cobblestones. This is what it's like at the back of the race, and suffering here just a fraction is Stijn Joseph of the young developing Belgian team Top Sport Vlaanderen.
Yes, don't discount them. They've had 1 or 2 good rides this week while we've been based in Belgium. Not too far away from where we're actually commentating across the border in France today at Roubaix. But in 15 minutes you would be in Belgium, where many of these riders train for this event.
Most of the teams have done reconnaissances this week on the cobblestones of Paris-Roubaix. Because of 1 or 2 slight changes, a number of cobblestone sections have been taken out this year because they've become just a little bit too dangerous for the event. But there is an organisation in the north of France for the conservation of these cobbled roads. And what they do is, in fact, they put some funding together to rebuild and relay a number of these cobblestone sections. In fact, it was, I think you're more the historian than I am when it comes to Paris-Roubaix, but a few years ago, Paris-Roubaix had to reinvent itself because the roads between Paris and Roubaix were just becoming impracticable, and they had to try and find how they could race over more cobblestones. So they moved the start a little bit closer to Roubaix to start in Compiègne. So the race got up to the north of France where the cobblestones were. Now it zigzags around the whole of the community.
And they're protected by law now. You can't put tarmac over these cobblestones because it's quite a big money spinner for the area known as Nord-Pas-de-Calais, as the riders here are bringing a lot of people in. Hotels are fully booked around the region for the Paris-Roubaix. It's the one classic race, I think, that really does draw the public's imagination.
Greg Henderson here, a nice position there on his bike, a man who's better known maybe to people in New Zealand for his performances on the track at the World Championships and the Olympic Games. But here he's part of Team Columbia High Road, and the Team Columbia High Road are hoping that their leader, George Hincapie, will have a good crack at getting himself a victory this afternoon. And obviously, I have to think Greg Henderson was given the nod to get himself into this early morning breakaway to be of assistance to the team a little bit later on in the race.
You never know what Greg can do. An ex-world champion on the track. He's married, in fact, to another world champion on the track, Katie McTeer, who comes from Beach Road down there in Melbourne. And of course they're based over here for the season now, and Greg is a very fast finisher. If that race were to come to the track, he would be odds-on favourite to win. I think he'd be one of the few riders show no fear of the bankings of the velodrome.
Zero fear, I would think, would be on the horizon for Greg Henderson if it did come down to the track. And it's a very difficult sprint for a lot of riders, because I think, as you've said, you and I discussed a little earlier, there are no more big bike races actually finished on velodromes. And it really is, for some guys who don't have a history of racing on the track, very difficult to judge the sprint down to the line here.
Well, I've got 11 riders back in the break again, and that's what they're saying. So, in fact, whoever was dropped off has just come back in.
Well, that's Heinrich Hausler, number 152 in the black jersey of Team Cervelo test team, sitting at the back end of the main field, and that's not a good place for him to be sitting. There's Sylvain Chavanel, number 2, the man who, for me, was a real revelation last week in the Tour of Flanders, and a solid teammate for Stein de Volder and, of course, Tom Bonen.
I think in some ways, Paul, you could say he's the revelation of the new season. He's got the new team here, Quick Step. He's a Frenchman. It's unusual to get a Frenchman leave a French team to come over to a Belgian team, but he's so at home, and he's riding with a complete new interest in the sport.
And just to add something else, in an era where people are always concerned about earning more and more money, in fact, he moved across to Team Quickstep for a lower salary than he had with Team Cofidis last year. So much did he want to be a part of this infrastructure.
Well, that is taking life a bit too seriously. In fact, his salary now €750,000, right?
Yep, which at the current exchange rate's around about $1 million. So I suppose he could take a slight pay cut.
Oh, I don't know. Things are so expensive here in Europe. It's quite expensive just to get a pint of beer. Silence Lotto, the boys setting the pace on the front here, and they have nobody in that break, and they keep getting slammed in the Belgian press here because they're not delivering. And so they really want a result today, and if it's going to come, I guess it's got to come with Leif Hoster.
Well, that's probably why the second in the line at the front there was the big man we see in the Tour de France looking after the interests of Cadel Evans. That was Johan van Sommer, and that's him, the tallest of the riders in the red and black silence jersey.
Good race for him, although being a tall man, he probably has a little bit of a private battle with the cobblestones because his equilibrium is a bit higher. But there we are, the whole peloton together at the moment. 187 out this morning from the blocks in Compiègne. It was a little bit overcast at the start. The slight wind, which is continuing to rise, has blown away the cloud bank. Really, it's a very pleasant spring day. And just looking at these riders now, it's the calm before the storm. Even though they have a breakaway, they're currently shown at 3 minutes 51 in front, so they're going absolutely nowhere. These boys are waiting, I reckon, for the crossing of the forest.
Well, I've seen situations in the past when we've come to the Forest of Arenberg, or the last 10 or 15 kilometres, a breakaway has been in front by 3, 4 or 5 minutes, and at the exit of the Forest of Arenberg, it's been cut down to a single minute. That's how important the Forest of Arenberg is in the whole scope of a race like Paris-Roubaix.
It's a couple of kilometres, the Forest of Arenberg. It is a beautiful area of France. It's an old mining area, but the forest is a very old one, and in 1974, they brought together 3 of the main forests of the region and made them as one. And it's now totally protected. It's the only time that anything goes through the forest, and it's Paris-Roubaix.
And it's a section of cobblestones that have been around since Napoleonic times. This again is a look of what's going on at the Tête de la Course, the head of the bike race there in the orange jersey of Team Rabobank is Joost Postuma. And as you said earlier, Phil had a very successful crack at winning the 3 days of La Panne, a race that he won last year. He's sitting on the wheel of another Dutchman, the man in front of him, the lowly crouched Servaes Knaven. That was a quick look into the face of Greg Henderson, but this is Knaven.
That was the little town of Somang we just come through there. These are dotted all over the area. The breakaway, as we're watching here now, Joost Postuma, 3:50, another couple of seconds nibbled off. Nothing to talk about. Angelo Furlan, one of the most experienced riders in the breakaway, and the only reason for the Italians to cheer right now in this breakaway. They have a very good record in Paris-Roubaix, though. Furlan got himself 3 wins last year, but he's nearly 32 now, and will be in June.
Steve Kotze riding for Garmin Slipstream, and the man who has said that he really does enjoy these cobblestone classics and hopes that one day he'll be able to really participate. Just also up there as well, number 155, that was Andreas Clear, and he's a rider who could be quite dangerous if this race doesn't get caught.
I'll put him down as probably the most dangerous man in this breakaway if it didn't get caught, because he's a winner of the Ghent-Wevelgem Classic a couple of years ago, and he knows how to ride cobblestone. So he's a good man for Cervelo to have in the early move. And sort of like a game of chess, you put a few people up front, hoping that you see them later in the day and they might be of some use. 124 kilometres to go. I must say, this race is moving quickly today. The judge, I was speaking to the referees yesterday, a little bit concerned about the rising wind, because it will largely be favourable and make for a very quick race.
Well, interesting you mentioned the game of chess. Very often these men we look at in the early morning breakaway, Phil, are the pawns in the game before the kings and queens and knights and rooks come out to play a little bit later on.
And then the queen bites back and has her own say in affairs.
And the queen on this occasion is the queen of the classics, and that's the French nickname for Paris-Roubaix, or the Hell of the North.
Yes. This is Matthew Goss sitting at the front here. He's really accelerated it. I mean, this guy's got such a great future.
Well, he had a third-place finish just about 4 days ago in the semi-classic in Belgium, the Ghent-Wevelgem race, a race that saw him and his team very aggressive indeed. But I wonder if they're playing their cards very close to their chest here, because Fabien Cancellara, who started the season off perfectly with a win in the time trial of the Amgen Tour of California, then has been dogged by injury and illness ever since, has for a lot of people been hiding his game, and could be a very dangerous man later on in the event.
Yes, nobody believes him when he says he's off form, that's for sure. We'll see later on today, as we're heading towards sector 21 now, and there's a service required here. BMC are having a rough old ride. That's Tony Cruz there, who used to ride alongside Lance Armstrong, and he now rides for Team BMC, which basically is built around the Swiss star Alexander Moos.
But they're a team who have managed to get themselves a wild-card selection into a number of the top races, probably because of their team manager, Jean Lelong, who himself for many years was a member of the organization of Armoury Sporting, the people who organized the Tour de France and some of the greatest one-day races in the world, like this one we're watching here, and of course nowadays Liège, Bastogne-Liège and Paris Tours.
Now just look at this. This is what we call fast tempo riding. They're probably around 48, 49 kilometers an hour. These boys at the front are riding to the limit of their ability to stop movement from behind as we head now towards the next sector of Pavé. Now there's all the chefs with the géants of the region. One before, they'll watch Paris-Roubaix go by, and then actually they'll probably just finish cooking dinner on this Easter Sunday, because it's 2:15 local time here.
Well, I think the French may well have a late lunch here on the weekend of Pâques, or Easter, as we remain with Team Silence Lotto on the front end of the main field. So many people, Phil, will run out of their houses or out of the restaurants to watch Paris-Roubaix come by, and then get back in to finish off lunch and to hopefully see a man from France win the bike race here this afternoon. But on the run in towards the finish, I think the flag which is showing more than anything else is the Lion of Flanders, and those flags will be waving for Tom Boonen, or of course his own teammate Stijn de Volder.
Well, as we continue now to search for Pavé sector 2021, we're looking for now, which is a 3-star sector. Comes in at 138.5 kilometers in.
Well, the leading group shouldn't be too far away. I would say they're not more than a kilometre away from going into section number 21 to go. And it's very interesting to watch the main field here as they zigzag about, trying to get themselves to the front end for the charge into the cobblestone section. You can see already a lot of blue and white jerseys of Team Quick-Step. That's the team of Tom Bonen and Stein de Volder. They're the team that have dominated this event over the last 15 years.
We're seeing a lot of lime green jerseys there too of Liquigas, an Italian squad. They've got Alexander Kudzinski, the Belarus rider who rode extremely well midweek as well, getting second place in Gent-Wevelgem as their leader. And they've got a good sprinter in Kiki, another rider that was taking part in the Tour Down Under this year. And Manuel Quinziato, also another good rider. There's the banner on the horizon. Stand by to get those bones rattled again.
Well, this section, 21 sections of cobbles to go to the finish, is the section of Verchin-Maugret to Kiernan, 1.6 kilometers in length. But in the back of their minds, these guys are trying to survive now because they know that the big, nasty old forest of Arenberg is now not very much more than about 20 kilometers away.
And just riding up on the far side there was the Bouygues Telecom rider, Steve Chanel. Off to our right is Wesley Salzberger from the Française de Jeux team. They're all trying to seek the smoothest section, which might just be to the right, but very often riders opt for the middle, hold a big gear. And again, Paul, Martin Wynant is having trouble on those cobbles.
Well, everybody's looking for that smooth piece of road over to the left-hand side, but very often that is the most dangerous place to ride because there are always little breaks in that smooth part, and that's where you see the accidents happen. The safest place to ride the cobbles is right in the middle on the crest of the cobblestones. And an interesting way of riding the cobblestones is, in fact, not to hold the handlebars too tightly, just to rest the hands on the handlebars and allow the bike to find what it thinks is the smoothest way across.
They're really packing the town here as they go through. Very difficult, lots of traffic furniture in these small towns in Belgium, but in France rather, but they become such great hazards when the big peloton go through. So you've got to stay pretty vigilant. We're back up with the leaders here. You get a good chance to see them over the cobblestones. If you don't think it's bumpy, take a look at the chain and see how that bounces up and down.
Most of these bikes now that the riders are using are fairly standard, but one or two teams have invested an awful lot into different technology, especially Tom Bonen. Bonen and his Quick-Step team have a couple of dampers in the front forks and the rear forks. The idea for that is that it takes a little bit of the bounciness out of the machine and keeps the machine much more in contact with the cobbles. Sector number 21 to go, 1,600 meters, a 3-star rating from Verchin to Kerenang. And for the moment, the cobblestones, most of the cobblestones we've gone over, Phil, are fairly dry, although I wouldn't be surprised a little bit later on to see a few muddy patches because there has overnight been a little amount of rain.
There was. It rained quite a bit during the day in Compiègne yesterday, but it came up to be a beautiful day in the end, but it may have left its residue lying around the forests. Certainly here, there's a little bit of a lull in the peloton. I'm a bit surprised to see that. A change of pacemaking at the front. Silence Lotto deciding to drop away completely just now, and see Johan van Sommen off to our right. But basically, it's Quick-Step who have come forth.
Taken over here by Team Saxo Bank, because I think everyone now, Phil, is starting to get a little bit more interested in these section of cobblestones. Team Saxo Bank want to get on to the next section of cobblestones in the first few places. There's Fabian Cancellara over on the left-hand side. You might have just noticed he was the rider with the orange sunglasses on.
Yes, now what does that tell you? Because he knows that we are inching closer to the crossing of the tranchée of Arenberg. And you've got to be at the front going through there, because for sure riders will fall in the centre of the pack, and then that could open up the door. Furlan on the left of our picture. This is at the back is Wynants of Quick-Step.
Well, Wynants, Phil, is just sitting there all of the time here. He's biding his time. He knows in the back of his mind that this breakaway is going to get caught, but he wants to stay at the front of the race for as long as possible, because he will then become an ally and a teammate again to his team, Team Quick-Step. And the most serious thing about Quick-Step and their success in Paris-Roubaix over the years is the fact that they've always been present in large numbers in the final 50 kilometers of the race.
118 to go as the peloton are on that section of road now. In fact, you will notice a lot of team cars are lying around the route, because they know that the cars can't get through to service riders, so they plan their campaign as well they put mechanics and spare wheels all over the place in the hope they've chosen the right place if one of the riders go by. It really is a lot hit and miss on this event. And you know, the great winner of this race, Roger de Vlamingh, who won it 4 times, he never punctured once during those 4 victories.
No, he didn't. In fact, he didn't puncture at all in his first 10 participations in this bike race, Phil, and it was only the last 3 times that he rode it that he started having flat tyres, and he put that down to the fact that maybe his form wasn't so good at the end of his career.
Well, he was getting a bit old. 3:55, they're not catching them up at all at the moment. It's come back from 4:08, back inside 4 minutes, but basically this is a regular chase here. They're not trying to catch the leaders. It's more an internal affair here. They're setting the pace to beat each other.
Well, Lotto very dominant at the front. There's just a small bottle. That is a very dangerous thing, because if you try and move direction on these cobblestones, even in the dry, they can be extremely slippery because they're made of granite. They're very smooth. Some of these cobblestones have been around for more than 100 years.
And they're covered in little films of dust, and that makes your bike jump all over the place. But this is good pacemaking now as we're racing along section 21 here with the peloton.
This is Johan van Sommeren tapping out a tempo here. In 3rd position in that line of Lotto riders, in fact, was his teammate Leif Hoste, making himself present at the front.
On to sector 20 now at Keranang with the leaders here. 117 kilometers from where we're sat in the stadium here. And these boys now beginning to keep the rhythm well. We'll know a little bit more about where they're going once we get through the Forest of Arnhenberg and who will be the main aggressors to try and bring them back. Greg Henderson. It's a long way from New Zealand for Greg, but he really has adapted to European racing.
He certainly has. He's on a really good squad, Team Columbia, a squad that had great success, the most successful team on the international circuit last year, not only for the men in the professional ranks, but also for the women in the professional ranks as well. We're looking here briefly at the main field as we go back to the front end of the bike race. It's a very difficult bike race to cover because so much goes on in a race like Paris-Roubaix. Sector 21 to go for the main field, 1,600 meters, a 3-star rating, but then just a very short traverse of flat road, Phil, to get to the next section 20 to go. In fact, only 3 kilometers of smooth road, and then, like the leaders, they will be facing up to the 2.5 kilometer section 20 to go.
As the riders battle it out here, you might be in a group, but you're riding your own race. There's no shelter from the wind here. You've just got to make sure you see the holes in front of you and make sure you don't go down them and take yourself out. So you've got to ride with a great deal of intelligence over these cobblestones. Just looking here, we're still with the back of the race here now. This is Morabito, I think, who's paying for the effort bringing back Popovic. He's still dancing at the back of these cobbles.
We have absolutely no idea in the chaos of Paris-Roubaix just exactly where Jaroslav Popovic might be situated. I would expect him to have moved up through the main field because he was given the title of team leader here for Team Astana, who in fact, let's not forget, have just won this week the Pays Basque race, a race in the northern part of Spain with again a dominating performance by Alberto Contador, not only winning the Queen of Stages, the toughest mountain stage, but the final individual time trial too.
Yes, and Cadel Evans riding just a little bit below par there, I feel. I thought he might have challenged Contador in that last time trial, but wasn't to be. The Olympic champion Sanchez, though, he flew the flag well for his new title there, won in Beijing last year. Meanwhile, back here, the Giants observing the passage of the Queen of the Classics. This is the breakaway. Sat at the back is Greg Henderson. There's a list of names for you in this breakaway. It's been this way now for a long time today, establishing around 50 kilometers into the race and holding their own at the moment. It took a while to increase from 1 minute, but now they've pushed it on up towards 4, although, as we've said that, it's coming back a little bit now. It's 3:35 according to our computer.
Well, I think until we get to the latter part of the race, it will increase and come down and increase and come down and on a number of occasions until we finally start to get to the big serious sections of cobblestones like the Forest of Arnhenberg, like Mont-Saint-Pavel, like the Pavé de l'Arbre, when then all of a sudden the main field would unleash its viciousness. Everybody's pretty much packed together here for the moment. We're going through a little bit of a lull before the storm. The main field have got themselves off of section number 21, and they're now facing up in 3 kilometers time to section number 20 to go, and that's 2.5 kilometers. They've then got 2 more sections of cobbles before they get to the Roubaix d'Arenberg, at the forest of Arenberg, where still the wild boar roam.
Well, it looks as though Alfredo has disappeared from our view now. As we're watching here, trouble again for BMC, or is this the return of Martin Kohler?
Danilo Weiss.
Danilo Weiss, is it?
And he had a little bit of a hard time there trying to get himself back up. Section number 20 to go. 2.5 kilometers, a 3-star rating.
"115 kilometers then as they bounce over the cobblestones here. Liquigas has got control of the front. Man missing from the breakaway is Alfredo, Française des Jeux, and it looks as though Matthew Goss isn't there either now, so we didn't see what happened to him. 3:45 is the gap, and I'd be a little concerned here. Liquigas, I think, have themselves a plan today. They know Kuzinski has some terrific form, and this is the place to display it for sure. So too has Quinziato, so they'll be working hard here.
Well, Quinziato was very aggressive just a couple of days ago in the single-day classic Gand-Wevelgem, and he may well be fancying his chances again here this afternoon. Again, you can see why it's so important to ride at the front end of the main field, because it's a lot clearer. You can get an idea of exactly where you want to ride. Wow, that was trying to take a bit of fast food on board, and that helper at the side of the road there was quite brave.
He was brave, but it was a bad catch, to say the least. He must play for the England cricket team, but I'll tell you what, that bottle could have caused havoc in that group then. If they start hitting that at an awkward angle, they will go down for sure.
These section of cobbles are really coming thick and fast now. Greg Henderson just sitting at the back there is on section number 19 to go, a section of 1.6 kilometers in length. There's the queen of the Giants of Flanders looks down on the queen of the classics.
Good roads for racing today, the boys will think. Just a lot of dust but no water here. Liquigas trying to get control of the front. Cervelo has sent the riders up as well now to share in the pacemaking as we inch closer to the first big challenge of the day, the Forest of Arenberg. And they'll want to see it before the rest of the race, that's for sure. This is Greg Henderson.
Well, he's very much at home, and he's got the great pedaling style, Greg Henderson, to get himself over these cobbles. What's very important riding over the cobblestones is to be able to combine great strength with suppleness. And here you can see Henderson sitting nice and high on the bars with his, in fact, if you look at those, the handlebar covering there, a lot of the teams for a race like this will actually add an extra layer of handlebar tape there just to make the handlebars a little bit more comfortable, especially everything is done on a day like this, Phil, to try and make the cobbles as comfortable as possible.
Well, Greg has had his best possible start to the season, 2 wins already here in Spain, and that's terrific for him as he now has got himself into the breakaway.
Well, just at the front end of the main field, a name has just popped up there. It was number 85, Enrico Franzoi. Now, he's a rider that Sean Kelly earlier on this morning tipped to me as being a great outsider for a chance of victory here in Paris-Roubaix. So maybe Sean knew something that we didn't.
He certainly knew something I didn't, I must confess. I've just seen Stein de Volder down there for Quick-Step. He's riding very handily near the front of the race, and a man that enjoys the cobblestones. They're all getting very nervous just now, and they're not at all concerned about this breakaway, which is down to 10 riders. They're just making sure that they don't have any problems themselves. Liquigas setting the pace.
Well, just to put the race into a little bit of perspective, we are now circumnavigating the northern town of Valenciennes. Once the riders come off section number 19, they've got a fairly long piece of road through the town of Denain before they get to Wallers. And they've got one small section of cobblestone section number 18 to go, which goes around the town of Wallers before it takes them to the tranchée of Arenberg.
And that's the first 5-star one of the day at 2.4 kilometers, dead straight in length.
Life at the back, and it still looks as if Danilo Weiss from BMC Racing is probably now, Phil, starting to wonder himself, what am I doing in Paris-Roubaix? Well, he's having a great experience. He's doing something that nearly every top professional bike rider wants to do at least once in their career, and that's participate in this race, because it is a crazy race. It's a race that probably should be in a museum like the Smithsonian Museum in the United States, or even the Natural History Museum in London, because it's a race of olden times. It's a race of courage and determination. It's a race of fighting back after bad luck, because everybody will have a story to tell. They'll all have their own private story to tell at the end of today's race.
3:35 as the peloton hits sector 19 of 27. We're counting down, remember. Gap here is 3 minutes and 40 seconds. 10 riders up front. And there's the cameraman's view of the Pavé. Oh, thought he'd fallen off for a moment there, but he was just turning round to reveal that Liquigas still are leading the chase.
But what that very weird little turning around of the camera did was it gave you an indication of the speed that these riders go over the cobblestones. And I like to cast my mind back. I used to love riding Paris-Roubaix because the team I raced for was from the north of France, so we were hyper motivated for this event. And one year I was injured and actually couldn't participate. I crashed in the Grand Prix of Denain 3 days before the start of this race. So I thought I'll go and have a look at Paris-Roubaix. And I was blown away by the speed that the main field goes across these cobblestones. And it really is quite amazing if you get a chance to come out one day and have a look at Paris-Roubaix live at the side of the road.
We'll bring you Wellingtons because it's not always as dry as this. We caught a glimpse there of poor Morabito trying to catch up with Angel Madrazo, the Spanish rider from Case de Pont. A bit of work to be done there, and just when they catch up they'll be hitting the forest, I would think, and they'll have to do it all over again off the other end. This is their Liquigas then. They've got control. Now what's happened here? When you see a rider freewheel, it's usually a problem, but no, it seems okay.
This is Bjorn Schroeder from Team Milram sitting at the back end of the main field, knowing that he's got his teammate who wears a number 1 on that squad, 101 Servais Carnarvon. He's in that leading group of riders who currently we've got down at 10 riders. And there's obviously a number of changes going on at the front, but Team Liquigas and Franzoy here is definitely doing the pacemaking to put the hammer down in the main field.
Well, everyone has to be on their game at this race because they're not just the riders, but our cameraman, look at him there, the acrobat, trying to get the pictures, knowing exactly where the riders are, but also the gendarmes who actually ride motocross motorcycles so they can keep up with these boys.
Well, I was just going to add that point there before you beat me to it. In fact, in this event as well, the motorbike cameramen don't use a normal road type machine. They use cross type machines because of the nature of the course that they're on. It really is a great job of work that's done by most of these guys.
There'll be quite a lot of people rather upset it's dry today. They love to see the battle of the mud, but we'll see how this one unfolds. It's going to be a very fast Paris-Roubaix today. This is back with the leaders now. In the pink there is Furlan. This is Postuma, the Rabobank rider. As they're working well together, there doesn't seem to be any passengers.
I think everybody realizes they want to keep the hammer down because they know that the main field will start to pick up the pace once they get closer to the forest of Arenberg. And every rider in this early morning breakaway will be thinking about the fact that there's going to be a split in the main field at the forest of Arenberg. There always is, because of the severity and the pace that the peloton will go through it. And they will then get picked up a little bit later on in the race, and they will then become great helpers for their men trying to win the race overall. The time gap, because of the pressure of the main field as we get that little bit closer to the forest of Arenberg now, has come down to 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Put that down to excitement. This is the town of Thion, and the leaders are through, and they've even got little speed humps there which have been put in to slow the traffic down. They contend with everything in Paris-Roubaix these days. This is the main field here, and a very narrow approach it is again. We're heading for sector 18 now at Havluy.
Well, that's just outside of the town of Wallers, and Wallers, as everybody knows, in the north of France, is not very far away from the forest of Arenberg. In fact, it's around about 10 kilometers between those two sections of cobbles.
Now a little bit of help required at the front here now. Liquigas are getting a bit tired. Franzoy says, I've done enough. Anybody else going to give me a hand? But on these narrow roads, you see, once you've got your head of the field here, you can block off anybody coming by. So you don't have to go fast anymore because nobody can make any progress.
Big Matty Heyman in the middle for Team Rabobank there. He's also had a very good last week of racing, and he seems to be finding some form and enjoyment in these cobbles. Looking over to the left-hand side, whenever there's a gap, it gives somebody a chance to move to the front end of the main field. That's just somebody trying to get himself into the first 5 spots.
Well, he succeeded. He's got to the top spot.
Once the gap
opens,
rider,
that is.
Once the gap opens, you've got to take that chance immediately.
Well, they've got some good riders on the Katusha team. Robbie McEwen, by the way, stays away from this event. He rode in the Gent-Wevelgem midweek, but he's not here for this one. as his team certainly is. And they carry one of the favourites, Filippo Pozzato, 161. If you catch a glimpse of him, also Ignatieff, the Russian rider, and the big sprinter here is Danilo Napolitano. There's the flag of Norway, who are having a great time just now. Boysenhagen winning midweek.
I wonder who the flag is for, if it's for Boysenhagen or whether it's for Thor Hushovd or whether it's for the national champion Kurt Atle Arvesen.
Well, Norway certainly has come on over the years. They don't have many world-class cyclists, but the ones they've got really are the best.
Well, a lot of people putting the name Thor Hushovd to the top of the pack this afternoon because he has a solid team around him. He's a teammate of Heinrich Hausler. And spoke to Heinrich Hausler just yesterday, Phil. He says he really was starting to feel as if he was going down a little bit after what has been an exceptional start to the season. I think he was boosted by the fact that he knows this race is going out live in Australia, and he knows that everybody will be staying up very late in the evening to watch him.
Yeah, well, that's a terrific incentive too. As the riders go around the right-hand side of the roundabout, we've got a little bit of a move here by a skilled Shimano rider. I think it was Tom Wieler's.
It was an interesting piece of history this afternoon, by the way, because for the first time ever, a Chinese rider is participating in Paris-Roubaix, and that is Yin Long, who is a member of that same skilled Shimano squad.
Well, it really is good to see those riders get to this level of a sport which is pretty alien to their country. They've got some good track riders, especially among the women, as we saw at the Beijing Games, but now they're making progress in the world of professional cycling, and good for them. Well, they're snaking across the road. They're chasing wheels here, trying to hide a little bit out the wind. There's the policeman. He's finally free to fly on his motorbike. And the other two up on the right-hand side there. Well, they've got the equipment to race over the grass if they need to.
Well, the leading group now are looking at around about 3:15 is the time they have to make up the main field if they're going to get caught. But it's for the leading group, they're now looking at 4 kilometers to go before the next section of cobblestones, and that is the section of cobblestones from Avluy to Wallers.
Wallers, the town that hovers just by the forest, and that's where it's all going to happen for the first stage of Paris-Roubaix. Certainly won't be decided there. Again, Lotto have now regained the peloton here, trying to get a little reaction going, and they're having some effect. 3:15 is the gap right now as 5 riders trying to form, but the peloton are very vigilant. Everybody nervous now. The next 10 kilometers is the first showdown, I think, and they know it, that they want to be still in a winning position when they come through the forest.
Well, this group, in fact, because of that slight acceleration, has forced 5 or 6 riders. Note the presence of a rider there from Quick-Step. Quick-Step are very attentive. They know how to win this bike race, but very rapidly followed there by Danilo Napolitano. And now he's a sprinter who, for Team Katusha, is obviously masking and copying the tactics of Team Quick-Step.
But he was the guy that pushed his way to the front, and if he were to get up front, that could be a different ballgame. This is Sylvain Chavanel here, who has now started to mix. I've got a feeling about this guy today as well.
Little tactical move for Sylvain Chavanel, takes the pressure completely and utterly off Team Quick-Step, because everybody knows how the form of Sylvain Chavanel is. They saw it last week in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, the Tour of Flanders. He was all over the breakaways, sacrificing himself for the team. And wouldn't that be a strange one if leaving a French team to go to a Belgian team, the Frenchman came up with a win?
It'd be superb. There'd be nobody complaining from France or Belgium, I can tell you. It's interesting how they're doing a lot of racing here on the good roads. It's psychologically, sometimes you can steal a march because everybody expects it all to happen on the bad roads.
Well, we're looking at around about 4 kilometers to the next section of cobblestones, 18 to go, but we're looking at 14 kilometers to go to the section of the Forest of Arenberg, and everybody's trying to get themselves into a small group to get onto the Forest of Arenberg in advance of the others.
Incidentally, it's 10 years, slightly more, 11 years since Frédéric Guédon won this race for France. No Frenchman's won since, so it's about time they won in their own country.
Another little group going off. That little hill that you can see in the background is not actually a natural hill. It's a slag heap, the waste from the old coal mines, which were very abundant in the northern part of France.
A little bit of movement now taking place. Everybody looking to see if they can get any going. Christophe Laurent, the Frenchman in the blue there for Agri-Tobel. In second place, little flip of the arm there saying, come and give me a little bit of help up here from the skilled rider.
Good move by Laurent. He knows this part of the world extremely well, and he knows at Paris-Roubaix very well indeed, and he realizes if there's a slight lull at the front end of the main field, all he needs is a 30-second or a minute advantage to get himself safely into the Forest of Arenberg, because once this group starts to get there, Phil, it is mayhem. It's a battle. It's a war to get into the Forest of Arenberg in the front few places.
This is Kupshov from Kazakhstan here. His battle is to just get back in the peloton right now, as he's been back to the bar to collect all the drinks. Now he's got to go and find the guys to give those drinks to. He's what we call the domestique today, and he's trying to keep the race favourite on his team in good position.
If you have a look at the length of that main field, it's not in full flight just yet, but it certainly is starting to get in that way, because when you see a main field stretched out in a long line like that, it's an indication that there's a lot of pressure at the front. There are a lot of riders at the back end of the group, but most of that now is at a point in the race where they realize in a few kilometers time we don't have much chance to go back to the team cars to get bottles and extra food. So now's the time to do it, get back into the main field before the Forest of Arenberg, because for some of these guys the race is going to be over in 14 kilometers.
Well, we've just passed through the 150th kilometre of the race today, a couple of K ago. So now it's time, I think we can safely say they're all warmed up, and it's now a question of good positioning for what is the last crucial 100 kilometres of the race, because that's when we can pick up most of the cobblestones.
Not sure if we saw that nice little bunny hop halfway down the main field. One rider there looked like a Rabobank rider, came straight into that traffic circle, and all of a sudden there was a directional island in front of him. He couldn't go left or right, so he just jumped straight over the top.
She's crossed the guard here at the moment on Saxo Bank.
Just get a chance to look at this bike here if they drop down a fraction. This is the specialized bike, which has been specially made for Paris-Roubaix. Now, if you look at the back, if we get a chance at the rear forks, it's got a little circular thing in there, and that's where the damper is to try and take the roughness out of the cobblestones.
Postuma going through. Nearest camera here is Chanel. This is a good solid working breakaway. There doesn't look to be any passioners at all. There are 10 of them. Been away for a long time now. Waiting as they head up towards Wallers and into the Arenberg Forest. Good smooth road here. They know what's happening behind. They're not thinking about whether they're going to win Paris-Roubaix. They're just getting on with their job just now. They expect somebody from this pack to join them at some stage today.
1.5 kilometers to go to the next section of cobbles for the leading group, and that's the section now, Louis, to Wallers. It's section number 18 to go. It's a section which is fairly long at 2.5 kilometers, so that will rattle a few bones.
It always amazes me how they squeeze in and squeeze out as they approach those sections of the road with the strips down the middle. They've really got to stay alert, otherwise you catch those, you have a nasty fall. Somebody's up on the pavement on the right, just a little bit of a jump with his bike. The crowd are stepping back rather smartly as he comes through.
Well, Phil, there are no holds barred in Paris-Roubaix when it comes to getting to the front end of the main field, because it is such a critical positioning in coming into the section of cobblestones that all of these riders understand. And if there's a little piece of pavement over to the left or right hand side and you can take advantage of it, you've got to grab it straight away. Columbia High Road now moving to the front now. I wonder if that is for Big George Hincapie.
Who else? Big George, as they start to push up, and Boysenhagen also up there now, as there's a lot of movement again at the front. A changing of the guard here at 103 kilometers.
Getting a little bit nervous now. A nice move to the front by Team Columbia High Road, but see how the riders are filtering up to the front all of the time. It's almost like a fermentation or a distillery, with the stronger riders distilling to the top end of the main field.
Two pelotons split by the centre now as they go around the roundabout. A chance for some of them perhaps to regain their position. And the Giants are all over town today. 103.4 kilometres still to ride. We've got 10 riders up front. Latest time gap is exactly 3 minutes. We're now racing on to sector 19, I think.
18.
18, is it? Yes, you're quite right, 18.
To go.
Have we?
4 stars this one, getting a little bit more difficult now. 2.5 kilometers in length and 103 kilometers to go to the finish. And still the man from Quick-Step, Martin Wijnands, sitting at the back end of the field. He's thinking about the job in hand that this team has in the latter part of the race, because this team, Team Quick-Step, in various forms, either from Mapei or from Domo or from Quick-Step, as its sponsor has been over the last 15 years, have always been dominant at this one race.
Yes, Martin Winans sits at the back. It seems to be where he wants to be, probably because the team are happy he's in the break, but don't want him to help him pull this break to any big advantage. Bigger fish on the team are expected to win later on today. So he's sitting at the back, sitting behind Steve Chanel of the B-Box Telecom team in that blue jersey. And the long, thin line deciding on this particular stretch to drive down the centre of the road.
Well, the race radio is telling us that the race, the group is definitely 10 riders at the front, and I presume it must be the Française de Jeu rider who got dropped before, who is no longer there, Johan Offredo.
Yep.
I haven't seen him for a while. He was struggling to try and stay in contact while we go back to the main field. There's a lot of movement there. Team Rabobank, you can see the orange jerseys moving up on the left-hand side. Now that will be for Juan Antonio Fletcher. And in fact, Sean Kelly reckons that Juan Antonio Fletcher is a good man to tip for the victory here this afternoon. He's just getting right there, up there in age, and historically over the years, riders of over 30 have been pretty dominant in Paris-Roubaix, and Juan Antonio Fletcher this year is 31 years of age.
And no Spanish cyclist has ever won the Paris-Roubaix, by the way, but Fletcher finished second 2 years ago, and Miguel Poble was second in 1958. So they've got 2 second-place finishes from Spain, never a winner.
I have a feeling that Martin Winans is feeling very comfortable in this group. He's just sitting there waiting for the race to come back to him from behind.
There are the list of riders for you. 101 kilometres to go here. We're on sector 18 of the cobblestones of 27 sectors. We're counting down, remember. And this breakaway has been away for much of the race today. They've built a lead of over 4 minutes. It's back now to just inside 3. Latest time check, 2:55. In this breakaway is Steve Kotzer of the Garmin Slipstream. There's also a couple of riders from the Antipodes with Greg Henderson and Wesley Sulzberger. And none of the big favourites have made a move yet, but they're not allowing this break to go now. They're almost bringing it back into touching distance before they enter the Forest of Arenberg.
Well, this is section number 18 to go. The Forest of Arenberg is 17 to go. It's a long section, this section at Haveluy to Wallers, 2.5 kilometres in length. A 4-star rating, which means it's almost one of the most difficult sections of cobblestones that the riders face up to. And it was interesting to note that, in fact, it was Kurt Atle Arvesen, the Norwegian national champion, who's come to the front to pace Fabian Cancellara. Maybe Cancellara, Phil, has been playing a very clever game over the last couple of months when he's been recovering from illness and injury.
Well, it looks like we're going to have these 10 leaders getting themselves onto the straight in Arenberg with a lead of about 2.5 minutes. This is Offredo about to be swept up by the peloton. He was with the leaders. He's on his way back now as we race along sector 18.
Just 100 kilometres left to go to the finish. These 2 sections now are going to be very important in setting up the final strategy of the race, because this is the race, part of the race where I've always said, and I will continue to say, forms the race. You don't win Paris-Roubaix here, but a lot of bike riders very often in the past have lost all chances.
Well, Quick Step trying to get to the front here now. Also, we've got Saxo Bank riders up here. Fabian Cancellara, by the way, is not far away from the front. I think he's looking for the perfect entry into Arenberg. But any rider who's in with a chance now has got to be in the first 20 men. Too many things go wrong when they get further down than that.
I had Fabian Cancellara in about 3rd or 4th position at the front end of that line. They're going into a block headwind, but you get a chance here to see, Phil, how the main field is all of a sudden stretched out into a very long line, and too long maybe for David Boucher, number 181 there from Landbau Credit.
He was in front of our cameras earlier this week in Ghent-Wevelgem, Tour de Flanders, but he's not too happy here on the cobblestones of the Hell of the North. They're absolutely cramming this from side to side now. Very typical tactics. We're going back up towards the leaders here. No, this is Kurt Atle Arvesen, champion of Norway, going through.
I was just going to see, if you look at the bikes there, you can just see those little bubbles in the front forks and the little bubble in the back fork. That is the bike that's been designed by Specialized specifically for this one bike race only for Paris-Roubaix. And the idea is that it absorbs all of the bouncing of the cobblestones and gives the bike rider a slightly more comfortable ride.
Just taking a look there, Team Columbia moving their men forward as well. They've got the ammunition that could take out this race with Hincapie, perhaps even Boysenhagen again. Meanwhile, back at the race here, this is Riki from France of Lamberg. Oh, a massive pile up here. Somebody has touched the wheel, and all of a sudden the field is down.
Well, this is why you ride at the front, Phil. This is why you battle leading up to the cobblestone sections to be in the first 10 or 15 places. Over on the right-hand side, there's
Tony Cruz on the left here, Paul. The American guy is down. This is McKissick, another USA rider. 2 Americans here in trouble.
Hans Decker's over there as well for Garmin Slipstream, just getting himself back onto his machine. This is what Paris-Roubaix is all about. Stay at the front and stay out of difficulty.
This is Tom Lisa here, and he looks a little bit winded by that one. Case Depon have lost a rider down. That's Rojas. One of their top finishers has gone down as well. They've got to try and get themselves back in order here. Team cars are blocked.
AG2R Sebastian Inno went down very hard over on the right-hand side. We're picking our way through. This is Hans Decker's for Garmin Slipstream. He went down very hard. Another guy's just gone over. This section of cobblestones, Phil, started off nice and calm with no panic at all, but all of a sudden you might just have noticed a little bit of mud over to the right-hand side, a little bit of mud over to the left-hand side, and all of a sudden it's chaos.
And that was a silenced Lotto rider too. I think it was Roy Sentiens who was just also off the back. Meanwhile, the tempo will be held at the front here now. These riders will know that there's been a fall. They won't know who's been involved.
Well, they didn't panic. Look how many black and white jerseys there are at the front of Team Saxo Bank. That is the team of Fabian Cancellara, the team of Bjarne Riis, who, by the way, has made the journey down here from Denmark, Phil, this afternoon to be in the team car. And I wonder if that's trying to tell us something.
Well, we know that their man for this race was to be Stuart O'Grady, the Australian. Unfortunately crashed and is now recovering. He's won it before, the only Australian ever to win this race. And oh boy, he'd be watching these pictures and wishing he was part of this scene. It's his race for sure. Just going past there, Floris Augustinen, a Dutchman on the Skill Shimano, as our motorbike camera starts to cut its way back up towards the front of the bunch.
Well, that's the first little selection there. Another man at the back, Aurélien Claire there, a great sprinter on Team AG2R. That is the length of the main field. The hammer now, Phil, before we go to the Forest of Arenberg, has suddenly come down.
Well, it's happened, but perhaps a little bit earlier than we anticipated. We are now leaving section 18, and so the next stop for the men now will be the forest itself.
The Forest of Arenberg, we're looking now at around about 11 kilometers to go, and look what the acceleration at the front end of the main field has done to that time gap. It's brought it down from that 4 minutes it was a few moments ago to 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And Team Saxo Bank now all of a sudden looked like a team that weren't going to be have a role to play in Paris-Roubaix this year, because Fabian Cancellara has been sick for most of the year. He's had injuries, a crash in training. Stuart O'Grady is out with a broken collarbone, but in the orange glasses there, Fabian Cancellara is now looking rather scary.
Well, he's certainly showing his skills. He's the Olympic time trial champion, and he's put himself in a great position here now. Team High Road in those yellow and white jerseys as well have moved up nicely here over the old speed humps as we race now, heading towards the forest. Big mining area of years gone by this. The forest itself sits on top of a mine. As we now watch the leader here, Martin Maskant, number 31, clearly involved in that crash. He's being brought back to the race by teammates.
Well, this is why you have to have a strong team in a race like Paris-Roubaix. He obviously was caught in that accident there. He's got Mike Friedman is up there with him, trying to pace him back into the main field. And I think that's Will Frischkorn as well.
Well, they've done a good job to see him and get him out of trouble with 2 strong teammates. He should, on this occasion, recover from this one. Aurélien Claire is making good advantage of the Garmin Slipstream Express.
Well, you see, Phil, how much the race can change in the space of a single kilometre. There's nobody at the back end of the race now to help, and he's got to try and fight his way back into this main field in the next 11 kilometres. He needs to reintegrate the pack. There they are, just around the corner. But he needs to reintegrate the pack before he gets to the Forest of Arenberg. Otherwise, he could find himself a couple of minutes behind.
And he knows he's going to ride right into the back of chaos once we enter the forest, which is just up the road there now. And 97 kilometres to go. The changing face already of Paris-Roubaix. Maskant here last year for the first time, came into the stadium and finished 4th.
Marcus Burkhardt over on the right-hand side there, dropping himself onto the road. He's the rider in the yellow jersey of Team Columbia. Bringing up the men from Quick Step. I noticed a few moments ago, Stijn de Volder was not very far away. This is chaos. This is the battle now for the forest. It is so important. use everything. There is Tom Bonan on the left-hand side. He's on the wheel of his teammate, trying to make sure that he goes to the forest in the first place. You see the headgear over on the right-hand side. Well, that headgear from the old mine, which is right underneath the forest of Arenberg, is where the forest begins.
And that is where a huge crowd is awaiting to welcome the 107th Paris-Roubaix as he comes into the forest. Now, Stein de Volder, very well placed in the front half-dozen riders at the moment. The former champion of Belgium, the winner of the Tour de Flanders. He knows how to ride cobbles, that's for sure. They're snaking the way now to enter the forest. The leaders must be right on the entry gate.
And still a little bit behind the main field is Martin Maskant of Team Garmin Slipstream, trying to get himself back into contention. It's going to be absolute chaos, but he cannot panic. He's got to think, I've still got a chance here this afternoon.
These are the riders of Quick-Step now as they try to keep Tom Bonan in the action. I haven't seen anything of Tom Bonan. He has to be there. In fact, he's just there peeping into our picture now, sitting second wheel as he heads towards the peloton, in towards the forest itself. Perfect positioning.
Last time we went into the forest, the first man in was Stein de Volder, third man in was Tom Bonan, fourth man in was George Hincapie. This is the leading group, Phil. They have survived. There's Steve Kotzer there in Garmin Slipstream. Probably doesn't even know that his teammate further back has been involved in an incident and is struggling to get back into this race. This is the old mine which goes under the forest of Arenberg. It's no longer a working mine. It's a museum to the mines that have dotted the northern part of France, and many of them operated by Polish immigrants who moved across here over many, many years.
And just to the left of us, our picture now is the level crossing of the railroad, and then we are into the forest itself. And it's a dead straight 2.5 kilometers. You can see the other end. There's the bridge. That's the entry point. The level crossing is up, so there's no trains coming by. As now they try to reposition here and get ready for the big bounce as they charge dead straight to the top end of this forest.
17 sections of cobblestones to go. This is a 5-star section of cobblestones, Phil, 2.4 kilometers in length. And there's not very many smooth cobblestones along this section. Still sitting comfortably at the back there is Greg Henderson of New Zealand.
2 minutes 40 the gap as they go in here now. This is Henderson at the rear of the race. He's going to have to be very careful now and just watch the progress, that nobody misses a cobblestone in front, and down they go. They barrier this section now to try and keep the crowd off the cobblestones, as they will now continue straight for 2.4 kilometers.
These guys have got the safest approach to the forest of Arenberg because there's just 10 riders and they don't have to battle as much as the men in the group behind will have to battle to find themselves an ideal route. Kotzer over on the left-hand side, he will write this book down, this day down, Phil, in his book of memoirs of his professional cycling career. The day that he went into the forest of Arenberg in Paris-Roubaix in the leading group.
Well, the American's only 24. What a long career he could have ahead of him. He could ride this 10 or 12 more times yet. Maybe not the time to remind him of that. The Spanish Basque flags flying on the left of the road now. Maybe cheering on later on Juan Antonio Fletcher, perhaps. As this is Angelo Furlan, the Italian in the breakaway, who's just keeping his nose out of trouble. But at the moment, all going according to plan here. Nobody making a mistake.
It's behind that it'll be absolute chaos. And there is the chaos of the front end of the main field, ready to come into Arenberg.
So as we look now at the peloton over the top of the old mine head there, the peloton is speeding towards the entry into the forest of Arenberg. The time gap to the leaders of 10 is 2:40. Martin Maskant, the unlucky rider there, who had that crash, is still, as far as we know, chasing to come back with two teammates being paced back at the moment by Fishkorn and Michael Friedman, the two Americans trying to put him back into a position here.
The forest of Arenberg, the Roubaix of Arenberg, 2.4 kilometers in length, the 17th section to go before the finish. 5-star rating. This is probably the scariest section of cobblestones of the whole of the race. All of these riders fear the forest of Arenberg so much that they know its history and the way it has formed the race over many, many years. For the moment, everybody nice and safely onto it.
Riding down dead center here, it's probably the best place to go. And keep an eye out, because you might see them go before we do here as we watch them. And they're in a perfect straight line. It's all about speed now. Our cameras foreshortening the distance here. The crowds are watching everything in the distance there. is the huge pack now. The riders at the end, somebody's shot off into the crowd there. You see the crowd, the whole field has gone off into the crowd there on the right.
There's a number of riders gone down. This is the damp part in the middle of the course. Somebody went straight across the road as if he lost complete and utter control and into the crowds, and that caused a certain amount of chaos, but it's not caused any chaos for Quick-Step, who are sitting on the front end of the main field. It's when you're under pressure. This is the damage. This is what's happening behind, and this is actually going to be pretty bad, Phil, for Martin
in trouble again. Now, where is Mascant? He was coming up, but he'll have been delayed by this. This is the big problem. He comes onto the back of the field to find he's in trouble again. There's the race director's car. Stop now as they try to sort the riders out here. One rider virtually undressed there, and it looked to me as though it was Hayden Roylston, the Kiwi on the Cervelo team, who's had quite a fall there. His shorts almost ripped off him.
I think Vicente Reigns went down there as well from Team Columbia High Road very dramatically. Again, this crash happened halfway down the main field. It's difficult from this position to try and see who is looking comfortable. That, though, I recognise the position of Tom Bonen right in the middle in his Quick-Step jersey. This is the Tête de la Course, the survivors of the 10-man breakaway, which is splitting up a fraction, but I don't think they've lost anybody. Wesley Sulzberger, Phil, still comfortably on the back of the group.
As they leave the Forest of Arenberg, a bit of smooth road for not for very long now as they race towards Honang. Now you see the importance of staying at the front of the race, because that crash happened in the pack about dead centre, and Bonen should be okay. I think Hincapie's up here too.
That's Hincapie in fifth wheel there in the yellow jersey, and you can see the chaos that has happened in the Forest of Arenberg. It really has been the first sorting out. As I've always said over many years, and I know people get a bit bored with me saying it, Phil, this is where you can lose Paris-Roubaix. This is where you have to ride at the front end of the pack.
And still the pressure is on here. The gap is down slightly. They came in 240 behind. They're going to go out at 205 behind the leaders. But it's the crash which has done the damage right now. We don't know who's gone just yet, but we'll work it out. But certainly we've got some strong riders driving now at the front. There's confirmation, 205.
A lot of black jerseys there. That's Johan van Summeren trying to stay in contact, but the black jerseys indicate that Team Cervelo test team have got a lot of riders in this group, and here is one of their men coming to the front here.
Well, as they continue to take us towards the end of the Forest of Arenberg, they've got 91 kilometres left to ride. There'll be no peace now, because the cobblestones fly at you very frequently, and your pressure must stay on.
Well, there's Hincapie riding in second position, third position there. I presume that is Juan Antonio Fletcher just slightly in front of him. But the Forest of Arenberg once again has said why it is such a reputable climb, a reputable section of cobblestones. At the first part of the main field now are slowly starting to come off.
Well, the next section of cobblestones, a mere 3 stars, but they'll be bad enough now as the riders try to repair the damage here. I just can't. It looks like Hausler to me. It is, I think, Hausler who's here taking the bottle and reassessing the situation.
Well, he said he didn't feel that he had the legs here this afternoon, but he's got over the first obstacle of the race as Heinrich Hausler there, wearing number 152, is in the first selection of the front end of the main field.
Yes, and now he's content to slow down, see who joins him, and start mixing at the front. He won't slip too far down this group, because that would be too dangerous.
Well, Leif Hoster is in the group. That's Fabian Cancellara just looking over his shoulder, trying to sum up what's going on. That's George Hincapie in the yellow. Hincapie too has passed the first selection of this race.
Well, George has his uncanny habit of knowing where to be and when to do it. He loves this event, and he's placed himself perfectly. I think Hausler's dropped back, Paul, to check on the whereabouts of Thor Hushoff and then get back into the action.
Well, there's Cancellara. He wants to see which of the men in black have managed to get themselves into this group. There's a lot of riders from Cervelo test team, but also for me, maybe one of the most dangerous men a little bit later on is going to be Fabian Cancellara, number 1, sitting at the back of the group, feeling quite comfortable now because he's got through the first test, is Tom Bonen.
Last year's winner and a 2-time winner of this event. The record is 4 wins, but Tom has a chance of getting 3 this time, and he becoming one of only 6 riders to have won this race on 3 occasions. So the first battle is over. The Forest is behind the riders now, and so far the big stars have read it right.
Just caught a quick glimpse there of number 154. That's Thor Hushoff has got himself into this group, and still the chaos of the Forest of Arenberg. 1 or 2 of these riders, Phil, are going to have to walk out of the forest here this afternoon.
Meanwhile, life back in the forest is not so pleasant for a lot of riders back here now. The Paris-Roubaix is finished. The team car's still struggling to get through. I noticed that big leading split has got themselves a neutral car. There he is. The yellow car will do offer wheels and help to any rider. This is quite a select little group now. We'll have to start working out who exactly is in it.
Well, this is the leading group. One of the riders from Saxo Bank is Kasper Kloostergaard. He's the Danish rider on that squad.
Yeah, this is the leaders. These are the leaders here.
Postuma. Coming up next for Quick Step is Wijnants, Angelo Furlan. This is the leading group who now realise they've had a huge amount of their advantage slashed, because their advantage over the front end of the main field is now just sitting on 1 minute and 40 seconds.
Yes, they've lost 1 minute in that crossing of the forest, but that's okay. I think they probably expected that. They're still in a very strong position here. They get the advantage of seeing the cobbles first, and they're still 1 minute 40. It's a good kilometre and a half lead over the chase, which is okay at this stage of the race. 89 kilometres still to go, but we've only cleared 16 sectors of cobblestones. Or rather, there's 16 sectors to go.
Unfortunately, yes. And that's the important thing now. There's a lot of riders from Saxo Bank have made the selection here this afternoon. That's Fabian Cancellara. He realises that they are now in a very strong tactical position, because they've got a lot of riders in this group. Also, a lot of riders present from Team Cervelo. That's Roger Hammond there, the rider who previously finished 3rd in this race, and the best British performance for many, many years.
Alongside Barry Hope, and it is the best British performance as those two riders equal our 3rd finish. But Cervelo have done what they did the other day. They've put a lot of riders up here. Now, it's not the time to remind them they blew it in the Tour de Flanders, although they had the numerical advantage. Maybe they can do something better today. It's going well for them right now.
Hincapie, on the other hand, Phil, I've only seen Hincapie in this group for Columbia High Road. He does have the advantage of having Greg Henderson a little bit further up the road, but that's not the presence for Team High Road I was expecting here this afternoon, because they've got some strong boys on board. Michael Barry, for example, Edvald Bosenhagen and Marcus Burkhardt. It's been a little bit chaotic. There's Bonen. You can see and recognise him from the World Championship bands on the end of his sleeves there. Last year's winner. Juan Antonio Fletcher in the orange. Best ever performance in recent years by a Spanish rider. But again, I have to say, I'm impressed this year with Team Cervelo Test Team, because it's a brand new team on the squad, and yet they've gelled so very quickly.
They have come together, and the women's team as well is also racing with great success. Almost exactly what Team High Road, which became Team Columbia High Road midway through the year, did last year.
De Volder wearing number 2, a little bit further back there. Chavanel. He is having a great race. In fact, we are saying here that this is arrière de la course, the back end of the race. So it may well be that Stein de Volder was one of the victims of the Forest of Arenberg.
Well, if our camera swings left a bit, they're chasing to get back in touch here. So too is Kurt Attel Arvidsson. The lime green colours of Enrico Franzoy from Liquigas also trying to rejoin the leaders. There'll be a scramble, and with a bit of luck they will catch up. Also chasing there is Matteo Tossato. It'll be useful to be alongside Tom Bone a little bit later on. He's a good lead-out rider. But we have a very interesting group of 20 riders settling in for the chase at the moment, behind those 10 leaders.
Well, they've got a little bit of respite for a few kilometres, at least in fact 8 kilometres before they get to the next section of cobblestones. A very tricky, zigzaggy section of cobblestones, which is 3.7 kilometres long, and that's from Ornain to Amage.
87 kilometres to go.
Jeremy Hunt.
Yes, Jeremy Hunt, the 2 times British champion, yet to ride his first Tour de France, maybe this year, waving through other riders to come and take up the pacemaking.
Talking to Jeremy Hunt yesterday, he was extremely happy to be with this team. He said he's feeding on the success of the team, and the team's successes are making him lift himself to an even higher level.
He certainly looked as though he wasn't eating enough yesterday, because he's got such good form now. He weighs absolutely nothing, probably around about 58, 60 kilos, that's all.
It's difficult at the moment to try and figure out just who is present, but I'm fairly certain that Hincapie is completely and utterly on his own, and that's very different to a couple of years ago when he had all of his henchmen around him. He's going to have to ride now, Phil, a very sensible tactical race. Pipo Pozzato is there, the leader of Team Katusha.
Yes, that's another big favourite, has made the split here, paying attention So this race has made a selection, but there are not too many of the favourites who has missed it.
Neither has Leif Hoster, number 41 there on the back of this group. Not got a lot of teammates there, but as you say, a lot of the big names were very present at the front end going through the Forest of Arenberg. Number 11 there is Fabian Cancellara. Now, who would have bet on that 48 hours ago?
The champion of Belarus is in there too, Yohini Hutriovic, rides for Française des Jeux. You'll pick him out. He wears a red band around his white jersey. And he's also riding very well this past 10 days here in Belgium and France. A lot of riders now putting their backs into this because they've got to move and try and cut into the lead. The gap continues to come down. It's 1:40. Then they say the main field has slipped up to 2 minutes 12 back.
That's not too far back for the moment, but they really would like to make the junction if they can, Phil, before they get to the next section of cobblestones. This is the group containing Stein de Volder and Sylvain Chavanel.
They're 30 seconds behind, catching up with Tom Boonen's group, and there would be a lot of help here for Boonen. Look at them if they could get up alongside him. They're all his teammates.
Well, they're all his teammates and the men who want to grab themselves a front row seat in the finale of Paris-Roubaix. Matteo Tossato, a great helper. Number 2, Sylvain Chavanel, the Frenchman, in great form in this Classics campaign season. And, of course, the man who won a week ago in Flanders, Stein de Volder, caught out by that crash. But the tactics is obvious. Get as many men from Team Quick-Step back up to the front of the race.
Well, I counted 30 riders here now, up from 20, so people are getting back to this chase group as they reorganize. It's almost incidental as a breakaway ahead right now because our director is correct to watch this. This is the breakaway being told the gap. I think it said 1:35, but unfortunately our television one is rather black. It looked like 1:35.
1:35 is the gap for these riders over the front end of the main field, which contains most of the pre-race favourites. But making a scramble to get back 3 riders from Quick-Step, and if those 3 riders from Quick-Step, Phil, we mentioned Chavanel, de Volder and Tossato, get into the group with Tom Boonen, Quick-Step once again become a serious factor in Paris-Roubaix.
And they might win the team again.
They certainly may well win the team again. They have been undefeated in the team race at this event way back since 1993.
That is unbelievable, but it just shows the strength of these riders. 1:35. Now, Team Columbia High Road have only got George Hincapie in this main group here, so he's going to feel very lonely, Paul.
Well, I've just got a feeling I saw another rider with a yellow jersey on there. I didn't see him earlier on, and it seems to me as if maybe Team Columbia have reinforced George Hincapie from the arrears.
There are 10 riders. I think you're right. There are 10 riders who have joined, and one is Team Columbia because there are definitely 2 riders here now.
In fact, I think there might be 3 riders from Team Columbia. Everybody is scrambling to get themselves back into this race. This is definitely Cancellara on the front from Saxo Bank in the white jersey. They've got plenty of men present. Jeremy Hunt, not too far away either. He's thinking about working for the team here this afternoon. Roger Hamilton is the smaller of the riders in black. Looking a little bit further back, and number 41, Leif Hoster, trying to figure out what is going on in this race.
At least he's made the move, and there'll be great relief all round for Silence Lotto at the moment that he's in the breakaway there. Greg van Avermaet is the other rider from Silence Lotto, and he is their sprinter and a very useful man if it comes to it. There's the pursuit at the moment, led by the Quick-Step riders who are desperately trying to reach that group to reinforce Tom Boonen, the captain.
Well, I think they are going to catch up because that is a strong allegiance at the front end of that group, and they are certainly going to drag themselves slowly but surely onto the tail end of that leading group of favourites. And about 3-4 kilometres away now, Phil, from the next section of cobbles, and that's the 16th section to go to the finish, but a long section of cobblestones, and I think they need to make the contact with this group before that section.
Well, it's the Cervelo solicitors on the front there. Hausler, Hammond and Hunt, all 3 men in black. And the swapping turns here with the 3 riders from Saxo Bank. They're anxious to keep the pressure on this group now, make it tough for these 3 Quick-Step boys leading the charge in the group in the bottom of our picture.
Well, I think one of those high road men to come back into that group was Michael Barry, who George Hincapie said to me this morning had been a great help to him in many previous Paris-Roubaix, and he was happy to have him back on board.
Champion of Norway, 4th wheel with the flag of Norway on his back. and that is Kurt Attel Arvidsson. Number 74 here is Tom Lisa now, having recovered from his fall by the look of it. No, it's not. It's Pedro Orillo, the Spanish member of the squad.
And the reason he's trying to get himself back into the race is to look after Juan Antonio Fletcher. 83 kilometers to go to the finish, and in a couple of kilometers time, at 82.5 kilometers to go, we were going into this long section of cobblestones. They will know that group there, which is following into the slipstream of the quick-step trio, and they'll know they want to make the contact before the next section of cobble starts.
Just look at the strength of Cervelo. The new team on the block are really driving on here, and there is the pursuit, because the three leaders below us there in the white jerseys are all quick-step teammates of Tom Bonan, last year's winner, and their objective is to get up to that group and see if they can help Tom out.
Well, these are all the big names. That this really is a powerhouse of a team. That's Roger Hammond just over on the left-hand side. Heinrich Hausler, Jeremy Hunt on the right-hand side. In this group, I saw a few moments ago Thor Hushovd, and in fact, this is Thor Hushovd at the front.
Yes, it was. Thor's slightly larger than the other boys. He's the first and only Norwegian to win the green points jersey in the Tour de France. Here comes the junction, but it's been a tough chase. This has not been an easy ride to rejoin after the problems in the forest, but I think it's going to happen.
You watch out, though, Phil, for the men in blue and white of Team Quickstep. In fact, there are 4 riders from Team Quickstep. They will go straight around the outside and put themselves at the front to say to Team Cervelo, OK, boys, this is our race. It's been our race since 1993. We've won it on 9 occasions in 15 years, and we're going to try and win it again today.
Well, they've got the firepower coming up, and that's for sure. We do have 2, certainly, and possibly 3 Columbia High Road riders now here. There might be more coming up in the junction. We're going to have a group of around about 50 riders here, but we're going to hit the next sector of cobbles just as they join. That's not good. We're looking down at sector 60 now. This is a massive 3.5 kilometers as the coming together of a chase group to the second group. George Hincapie is in the second group there as they now come back together on this section of cobblestones.
Well, Phil, we're looking at 16 sections of cobblestones to go, 3.7 kilometers long, this one from Ornain to Amage, and it's really a very difficult section of cobblestones. For a moment ago, George Hincapie was completely isolated in the front split at the front end of the main field. Now he has got 3 teammates who've managed to scramble their way back into this race. So much are they decided here this afternoon that this could very well be George's day.
And you see, this is the benefit of having a team around you. They've gone straight to the front to control this race in favour of Hincapie. Take a little bit of pressure off him now and also show the rest of the race they're here.
And not to forget, of course, that in the leading group of 10 riders, George Hincapie has another teammate, the Kiwi rider, Greg Henderson, who is in that leading group of 10, who are still holding on to around about a 1.5-minute advantage.
Well, we also know that Tom Bonan has made it. So too has Stein de Volder. Leif Hoster is up here. Pozzato has also made the gap. There is still, in fact, I can't think of any of the outstanding favourites yet, Paul, who've made a slip, because Cancellara is here as well.
All of the big names there. We don't know the position at the moment of the Garmin Slipstream team leader, Martin Maskant, because he actually had a mechanical incident or a fall just leading into the forest of Arenberg. But Arenberg, Phil, was so much chaos, we don't have any idea where he is right now. But I would suspect that he hasn't yet managed to get himself into the main field.
I agree. Some 40 riders have rejoined here, maybe even 50, but Maskant went into the forest off the back of the group and had to pick his way through the carnage of that big crash we had. There's another little group coming back anyway. Maybe, and it looks like there's a Garmin rider in this group as well as they start to close in.
Well, there's another group, and looks like it's a Garmin Slipstream on the front there, doing a lot of pace-making that group a little bit further back. So I wonder if this is the group of Martin Maskant trying to reintegrate. Another Garmin, another high road rider there as well, trying to make the junction.
There's a massive group coming in here. This is all coming together.
Well, it looks as if it's all starting to regroup. This is Le Danois at the back here, number 65. It's a difficult time to make the junction, Phil, on this 3.7 kilometer section of cobblestones. Still sitting at the back there, Pedro Orillo, number 74, with Columbia High Road very happy now to dictate the pace making over the front end of the main field.
Well, just inside 80 kilometres or 50 miles to go, it looks as though the main pack of riders here has basically come back together again. But at what cost to some of the chases they've had to do? And now they're going to have to do it all again, because once we get to the next 5-star section, there's bound to be more problems.